Okay, so now it's my absolute pleasure to introduce Dr. Rex Walters. Now, Rex is a leading pig geneticist, fellow of the Royal Society of Biology and of the Linnean Society, studied animal science at Y College before gaining a Master's of Philosophy by researching pig genetics, and so on and so on. That's just a brief... Your website, my friend. And Rex will be talking about genetic conservation of pig breeds with special reference to the Oxford in black.
Right, wrong one. Hold on. Sorry. There we go. Right. Thank you very much, Philippe. Follow Libby's talk. I'm actually going to reinforce a lot of what she's said. I'm really a pig man. I do get involved with other things as well, but I particularly want to talk about the Oxford Sandian black, certainly for the first part of this talk. And the reason you will see in a moment. But I'd like to start off by saying there is huge variation, obviously, in livestock species. Here you can see the modern pig and all the ancestors, the wild ancestors, and you can see they're basically split down into the southern American breeds, the peccaries and so on, and then you're over to the Asian pigs, the Visayians and the Babirusa and so on, and then you're into the pigs from Africa. So you've got this huge range, and of course we're really interested primarily in the domestic breeds rather than the wild breeds, but there is quite a lot of work going on actually looking particularly now at the DNA of all these breeds. Now, domestication, it's thought there are two routes of domestication of the pig, one coming from Turkey, Anatolia, one in the Far East. Lots of interbreeding. I think I'll just slide on this. Yes, so two independent areas. The exact dates are still unclear. We're starting to come down to 10,000, maybe 12,000 years ago, the first real domestication taking place. And there's evidence of mating with the wild populations, mostly the wild boar in the case of the domestic pigs, over many centuries. So again, lots and lots of variation. In history, pigs very important. There are slides there from Indonesia, from Europe, from Egypt. So pig, very important part of the culture. This is a slide I'll come back to in a minute, but if you look over on the right-hand side, you can see a nice-looking pig there in Egypt. And we've got this huge phenotypic variation in our pig breeds. This is really split down into the left and the right there. Here are the European breeds here. Here's the Mangalitsa that Libby was talking about a moment ago. Looks a bit like a sheep with all the fur and the wool there. Primarily a candle producer, for making fat for candles and so on. And on the other side, you can see the Chinese pigs. And the Chinese pigs have been interbreeding with the European pigs for many, many years. One of the main reasons is for fecundity genes, which I'm not going to talk about today. There's some very fecund breeds. And those are now being used by the big breeding companies to bring in these fecund genes. So lots and lots of phenotypic variation. Very, very key. Pigs actually are still the number one supplier of meat in the world. They are slowly being overtaken by chickens. The Muslim population and the sub-Saharan African populations are making sure of that because, of course, they don't eat pig meat. But at the moment, pig meat is number one in the world. I say this comes from many, many different breeds. Many, many breeds. And there is a growing awareness, obviously, about successful genetic conservation. Major importance there. And just a slide here. These are pigs. I spend a lot of time in the Far East because most of the pigs are in the Far East, but that's by the by. The top pigs there, this is Vietnam. You can see the famous pigs. Some of you will have been there, actually, up into the north of Vietnam, where they're actually kept on leads and taken round. This is Assam in northern India here. You can see again the pet pigs. And here are the famous Taihu pigs, the Meishan pigs, these very fecund pigs from China. My particular interest is in disease resistance, and there is disease resistance in many of these breeds, and that's really funding a lot of the programs now looking at domestic animal diversity, particularly in the pig breeds, the old pig breeds. Now in the UK, as far as there are two major organisations, the Rare Breed Survival Trust, which you'll hear a lot about in a minute. The British Pig Association gets involved with the pig breeds. Here are the traditional breeds that are looked after by both RBST and by the British Pig Association. So you'll probably have heard of these, even if you're not pig producers. All old traditional breeds, several of them named after counties and so on. I really want to major on the Oxus Andean Black. It's sometimes called the plum pudding pig, and you'll see a picture in a minute why that is very apt. The exact origin of the breed, like all the breeds really, is totally unknown, but at some stage it became fixed, and I use that word with no science behind it at all. But 200 years ago, approximately, in Oxfordshire. Now the numbers dwindled very significantly, particularly after the war, and some people thought it became extinct, some people didn't. And we had this gentleman came along, and he really revolutionised the ideas about the Oxus Andean Black. So I want to major really on Oxus Andes and about Andrew. So largely due to the efforts of Andrew, he saved the breed. There are one other person involved who I'll mention in a moment. But Andrew really set up the herd book, which you've heard about, which records all the animals that are alive, that are breeding, and that was set up in 1985, and with a breed society behind it. And it's really gone from strength to strength from then on. And it's now one of the most popular of all the breeds, and the jargon would be it's a good butcher's carcass. All the breeds say this, of course. It's got great meat quality, it's docile, it's easy to manage. You say, ask any of the pig breeders, and they will tell you their particular breed is wonderful at all these things. Here's the first official herd book, as I say, 1985, and if you probably see it at the top, I don't know if there's a pointer or not, but anyway, you can see there, here's Cobthorne, and Andrew supplied into that first herd book a large number of boars and a large number of sows, and did a fantastic job. And this is unfortunately not a particularly good photograph, but that is actually Andrew with the main stud boar that he was using at the time. This is taken in 1984, we think. So Andrew did a great job there. This is the introduction to that herd book. I just want to mention two other people. The other person was a man called Geoffrey Cloak, who's been dead for quite a long time now. Many of us know Andrew. He's a most delightful man, a total rogue, but like Andrew, absolutely committed to the cause. And the two of them really set this up. There's another name floating around in the middle of that, which is Elizabeth Henson, which is about 5 lines up. And really, quite a lot of the rest of this talk is using Libbys data to show what's going on in the traditional breeds. There is the plum pudding pig, quite a nice picture outside. So, back to this one. Kim Brooke has said maybe the Oxus Andean Black was around in Egyptian days. So she sent me this photo of the Oxus Andean Black in Egypt in 2000 BC. Right, so I just want to say a couple of things, just a bit of PR on behalf of the breed. The Bristol team at the university have done a little bit of work on the rare breeds, traditional breeds, and the quality of their meat. And this is just an example of some work they did, listing down some of the main breeds there. And this is on fatness. And you'll see the Oxford there is the least fat, and the large black is the most fat. Some people think you need lots of fat for good quality meat. So it's not necessarily bad to be fat. Make that very clear. But when it comes to some of the things like fat quality, the Oxus Andean Black actually outperformed the 3 main breeds they used in commercial production, the large white, the Landrace, and the Pietran. So it's quite a good pig, coming from really very, very small numbers a long time ago. So I want to, second part of the talk, where are we going now, and talk about the work that the British Pig Association has done with Libby, the program that she produced that she was talking about there, all the genetic analysis she calls GeniPed. and to look at some of the future conservation plans, particularly about pigs. We'll talk about other species later on. What can we do with this? Just, Libby's already talked about it, but in terms of breed structure, we can look at the geographical spread. Very important if there's a disease outbreak. Breed numbers, herd numbers. I've just got the one same thing, the Oxus Andean black distribution. You can see pretty well distributed. There is a bit round the sort of Oxfordshire, Berkshire bit, but it is well distributed, which is good news, and we've now got them into Ireland. Going on to effective population size, which Libby described, it's of course a measure really of the loss of genetic diversity. A lot of these are, in fact, almost duplicates of Libby's talk, but it's worth, I think, reinforcing. It's related, obviously, to the number of breeding boars and the number of breeding females, measuring the contribution they have to the population. Obviously, the larger any effective population size, the better the genetic health of the breed. So we tend to use this, and the government uses it, Europe uses it, as a key measure of where funding potentially might be going for particular breeds. Of course, we're assuming with a lot of the stats behind these breeds, we use things like random mating, which of course doesn't happen at all because we get passionate breeders like Andrew who very much want to go down a particular route. So sometimes NE is very much an overestimate of what's happening in the population. Here are the effective population size of the main BPA pig breeds. The green line at the top is the Gloucestershire Old Spots, which is really come off the list of animals that are endangered or in strife. The line here, the brown line, is the Oxus Andean black. You can see here, right at the bottom here, very, very small numbers. And it's really come up very, very, very well. And you can see the most recent estimate is that it was the third in terms of NE for the pig breeds. So it's been a real success story there. Some of the other breeds you can see here, the black line, the yellow line, you can see those are the breeds we're really quite worried about, which are the large black and the middle white. Go on a little bit about inbreeding again. Well, I think Libby's said quite a lot about inbreeding. Here slide, it's a bit garbled obviously, but there are the breeds, and you can see obviously peaks and troughs coming in. The particular, again, the red, the brown line is the Oxus Andean blacks. You can see it really reached a peak of nearly 11% inbreeding. Very, very high. That's the sort of thing that, the tigers and the various gazelles and all sorts of things, they start to get worried. Some of them go exceed that, in fact. But you can see how the line has gone down, and now the Oxus Andean black is the most inbred. But you would expect that. It came from a very small population back in the sort of early 80s. And we use this, obviously, because it allows us to really put our resource, we're talking pig breeds generally, put our resource behind particular breeds. And I'll say one of the reasons we do, or how that's done later on. Bloodlines, I want to reinforce this. I know Libby's already gone through it, but I want to reinforce it because it is a huge problem, I find, as a geneticist talking with breeders. They're all obsessed by bloodlines. They don't fully understand it, and it's causing strife between the two people, should we say, the scientists, the advisors, and the breeders who are running the breeds. So, as Libby said, boars named after the father, the gilt progeny, the female progeny named after the mother. So the particular progeny of particular mating have only one of the two family names, depending on its sex. And when we look at the inbreeding and things, really it's not related to inbreeding at all very often. And the breeders assume that the amount of variation in their herd is directly related to the number of male and female lines. It's got nothing to do with that at all. Now, the goal of the BPA, and to a degree the Rare Breed Survival Trust, is to try to educate breeders to look a little bit further than the bloodline naming, to go back to the pedigrees, to actually look at their computer, or if they still got a herd the boiler, the dining room table, to actually look at them, to make sure that over several generations they can minimise inbreeding. So we then go on to the use of geniped as a sort of a breeding tool and really reinforce some of the things again that Libby said. The practical rules: use as many boars as possible. Maintaining breed standards at the same time, the old dilemma, you know, do we go down the genetics route of having very, very low inbreeding, or do we go down the breeder's route of looking at time? I don't think there's any conflict there. I think they can work together very, very acceptably. But it is important that you use as many boars as possible, because, Libby explained, what effect that has on the effective population size and on the inbreeding in the group. Don't keep as many offspring as you often want to. So a boar mates with a sow, they say, oh, we've got 4 really nice boar progeny, let's keep them all. That's anathema to the conservation geneticists. So only 1 boar, please, per litter for future breeding. As Libby said, never allow more than 5% of a population and the future generation to be from one side. This is particularly important as AI is used more and more in conservation breeding. A few more rules: minimise inbreeding through controlled mating, use family line names very carefully, again, and in terms of boar representation, which Libby again talked about, we really want to identify the overrepresented males, and you had that lovely spike that Libby showed there of one of the animals, one of the males. You want to try and avoid that, obviously, as much as possible. It would be helpful to increase the representation of the least popular males. But of course, practical knowledge is also needed. It's not the geneticist who should be dictating this, it is the breeder, because they do have to think in terms of what the style and the type and the conformation is. So there may be a reason that a male is actually underrepresented in a population because he's crap, excuse my scientific term. So kinship analyses, I'm just going to very quickly go to the graph because try and show the sort of thing that Libby was there. This is a middle white breed, I think, yes. What we call traffic lights. And here we've got, first of all, the name of the animal, then the birth date, then the kinship that Libby was talking about. Then we've got the breeder, the owner, and the number of offspring produced. And we've literally got traffic lights. Is this an animal we really want to keep in the breed? Green. Is it one we possibly can? Amber. Is it one we want to avoid? Red. So very, very simple systems to try and help the breeders make sure they make the right decisions. And if they've got a choice, obviously, between 2 or 3 green animals there, and one's got good conformation and one's awful, well, they pick the good one. When you get on to mate selection, this sort of mating of most unrelated boars, matching them to females prior to their breeding, so it's allowing you to do a sort of a mating plan before it's actually taken place. So what if inbreeding? A rule of thumb, the thing that I like to use for certainly for pigs, is to have an inbreeding coefficient of 2% or less when we look at our mating plans. And just to give you an example here, we've selected 3 boars, and we go along to Libby and we say we've got 5 females, which ones do we mate with which? And you come up with these nice little figures that show, okay, there are the boar candidates, there's the female candidates, this is the litter inbreeding at the end, so the expected inbreeding you will get if you mate these animals together. And then you can, almost like a sort of a traffic lights again, you can say, okay, these we want to avoid because they're all over the 2% inbreeding level. Those above the line, they are all acceptable because the litter inbreeding is less than 2%. So again, it's just trying to help the breeders make the right decisions for the future. Gene bank. So right at the end, let me say that I've already said AI is coming in more and more. Boars are being selected for semen collection and, in fact, for freezing as well now. Freezing very important. We won't go into that now, but freezing can have a very, very important role in livestock conservation. There's a joint programme at the moment with the British Pig Association, RBST, and Deer Park, which is an AI centre in Ulster. And a large number of animals being collected. I'm sure Tom will talk about this later on. But I'd just like to say, as the sort of finale, Thank you, Andrew, for everything you've done, for all your work, particularly for the Oxus and the back. Thank you for the inspiration, because I think those of you who knew him, I certainly found him inspiring. I, got all the letters after my name and everything. By God, he pulled me up on a few things. Wonderful. And he did it very, very nicely, but my God, it was very, very firm. Fantastic. I found that inspiring, talking to somebody like that. And also his friendship, fabulous guy. Thank you, Andrew. We're all here to celebrate you today, and I'm delighted to be here. It's just fantastic. So, thank you, Andrew.